So, have any of you been watching this Twin Flames documentary on Netflix? I want to talk about this concept of twin flames. I just think it's ridiculous. It's not that I think that the idea of a soulmate is just absolutely impossible. What I am saying, though, is that the number of people apparently online who are obsessed with this idea and are actually living out their lives in accordance with the new age idea, people who are actually losing a sense of joy and fulfillment in the present moment because they are so obsessed with this twin flame that might be out there, or people who are in bad relationships, unhealthy, toxic relationships, even abusive relationships, and they're staying in them because they feel what they believe is this kind of like twin flame or soulmate connection. I think all of this is really absurd, and I think that it's and sad, regrettable, and I think that it's really so absurd that this twin flame group that's featured in the Netflix documentary, and also there's a documentary on Amazon about it. I think what is so jaw-dropping about this, about the fact that this couple, this man and this woman, this married couple who lead this group, oh, it's so jaw-dropping about the fact that they were able to amass thousands of followers and get, it seems, millions of dollars in donations, and people taking their classes, their online classes that cost what, like 3,000 a class. I think what is so amazing to me about it is that the guy that has, he is obviously ridiculous. He is obviously, like, within like 10 seconds of watching him, you can just see that he's not even really intelligent. I mean, he's just like some weirdo that, was kind of out there in your college class years ago or whatever, and full of himself and obviously narcissistic. And he berates his followers as they're talking, as they're paying to come to him for advice. So to me, and he brags about how rich he is off the followers' money. Anyway, I don't want to give away everything that happens in the Netflix documentary because it is insane, and it is insane what people are willing to do once they get on this train of thought. But it was just amazing to me that some people are so entranced with this concept of a twin flame, and they're so desperate for a real romantic connection, and they're so desperate to get into that chapter of their lives, marriage and what have you, that they will turn themselves over to someone who is just obviously ridiculous. Just obviously ridiculous. At least with some of these groups or some of these quote unquote cults, like you can see, well, the leader's intelligent, he or she is captivating, got some interesting ideas or whatever. That's the way I feel about a number of them. Or at least he's good looking or something. But these people in this twin flames thing, leading this twin flames thing, they are just so jaw-droppingly just absurd and ridiculous. So anyway, but here's what it got me to thinking. I was thinking, well, so I started looking online at more deeply at this concept of the twin flame, because honestly the only other time that I had heard about this was when stupid Megan Fox brought it up, what, a year ago or 2 years ago or whatever, to describe her relationship with Machine Gun Kelly. And she said well, he's my twin flame, which is like a soulmate, except your soulmate is two souls, right? And a twin flame is when you have one soul, it's like split in two or something. There was some obviously, very compelling distinction that she was making there. That was the first and only time that I heard of this concept of twin flames. And, of course, the way that Megan Fox put it made it sound even less intelligent than the concept would otherwise. And so when I'd had a friend who had mentioned to me something about the Twin Flames group, and actually I knew someone who was actually in it, but I talk about that on my Patreon. But anyway, it still it hadn't really like clicked for me that this is something that a lot of people are really into online. And so after I saw this documentary, I looked at the concept, and I looked at videos and Googled it and whatever, and like even outside of this cult, just in general, there are a lot of people online, predominantly women, I have to say, a lot of people online who are just obsessed with this twin flame thing. And there's a whole like sort of like philosophy. I mean, it's dumb as shit philosophy, but a philosophy that's kind of built up around it with different figures on the internet. The Twin Flames community. it gets so many views. It gets so many views. So many views. People are interested. And so it just made me think about how, and I don't mean this in a judgmental way because we're all susceptible to it to a degree or to a form of it, but it just made me think about how there are a lot of people who I think have an over an let's say an inordinate or oversized regard for romantic love and the romantic experience to the point that they can get so obsessed with this idea and can act in accordance with these kinds of strange ideas that they will like make mistakes in their life, or they'll even spend all this time on the internet researching this, or stay in bad relationships or whatever because they think it's their twin flame, or because they're so I guess they find it so painful to be alone. And so it just got me thinking about sort of larger ideas in our society about romantic love and about romantic relationships, and also struggles that I have seen people in my life face who have been at times in real depressions and real periods of desperation as they are alone and they desperately want and seek out and wait for, they feel like their lives are on hold for finally meeting someone that they love and fall in love with, who's right for them, and they can get married and they can have kids and they can start living their lives as they see it. And I've just seen a number of people go through various forms of this struggle. And I am not a normal person in this regard because for whatever reason, and I don't say this like as a point of pride or whatever, and it very well may, and probably stems from some problems when I was growing up and what I saw modeled for me at home with parents who were miserable with each other and stuff like that. But for whatever reason, though, I am really independent, and I'm still not legally married, not going to get legally married. I don't have kids, don't want to have kids, never had a desire to have kids. I prefer mostly spending time by myself. I find most forms of socialization really on some level painful or stressful, and I know a number of you do as well. Again, I'm not trying to say, oh, I'm so different. But I want to preface this by what I'm about to get into, because what I'm about to do is try to share with you a little bit of wisdom. Not that I hold myself up as some great authority, but middle-aged woman getting into middle age. I've seen a lot, done a lot, whatever. I've thought a lot about a lot of things and so forth, and read a lot, and share with you like a little bit of what I think is my perspective on relationships and romantic love and the nature of life with that and the nature of our lives in connection to romantic love. But I want to preface all that by saying that I recognize that I'm not, quote unquote, a normal person, in the sense that I just don't require as much in terms of socialization or someone there with me. Most of the time I don't even want to talk to anyone. To the point where even the person I'm in a relationship with will have to say to me sometimes, like, I need more communication than this. So I just want to say I recognize I'm not normal in these regards. But there are things that we can learn even from the abnormal. And I think that in our society, on one end of the spectrum, we've got people now who are completely obsessed with this idea of like twin flames and soulmates and finding this great romance, and people who are very much oppressed by these notions too, because they feel this pressure and this anxiety about, I've got to find the right person, I've got to find the right person, I've got to get in a relationship, I've got to have someone, I've got to get married, I've got to have kids, I've got to do these things in my life. Until I do that, I am desperate, I am empty, I am yearning. And it is, yes, totally natural for people to yearn for romantic / sexual / companion relationships, and it's totally natural and normal for romance to be celebrated in our society as it is. But I do think there's sort of a counterpoint to this perspective, which is to maybe get kind of real about what exactly romantic love means and what exactly I don't think it does mean, and also to recognize the degree to which we take something that's really a pretty basic function of nature and that's wound up with like hormones and chemicals and so forth, and we do romanticize it and make it into something poetic and make it into this sort of in this sort of like high point, this apex of the human experience. I found my soulmate. I found him. I met him. I met her, and we constructed this amazing, beautiful life together. And like there's truth in both, and there's truth in both of those perspectives. But I think sometimes we don't really see the other perspective, which is the one that I'm about to talk about. And also, here's the other thing that I was thinking about as I was watching this documentary about this Twin Flames cult. And look, I have to be honest with you, I was thinking to myself, all of these in this cult must have been really fucking stupid, because this is just obviously ridiculous. Like I said, these are just obviously ridiculous people. Like, I couldn't stand to listen to the guy running this cult. I couldn't stand to listen to him for like 20 seconds because it was just so obvious. And so I'm looking at these people, these mostly women, but these people who joined this thing and these people who completely changed their lives around for it and all of this, and I'm thinking, man, you're just really stupid. But then I have to say to myself, no, wait. First of all, they're not all really stupid, but secondly, some of them are. But secondly, but I have to say to myself, they are blinded by this, not only this need that they have and this desperation to find romantic love, but also by the fact that we don't really, in society, we don't really talk enough about how to be, not only how to be okay being alone, but actually, and not only how to be happy being alone, but let me say it even more, we never talk about the fact that in a number of ways it's better to be alone than it is to be with someone. Now, before you start to get freaked out, because people are going to be like, no, research shows that if you're married, you live longer and all that. I don't mean it like that. I'm talking about like our deeper existential spiritual purpose on this earth, for those of us who believe that whatever God you believe in or not or whatever, but this sense of like, what is the meaning of life? And is the meaning of life truly absolutely tied to having to have a romantic partner that you go through life with? Is it? And I just don't think that that's necessarily so. And I think that there are things, actually very real, important things, that we give up when we make the trade-off to get into a romantic relationship long term, or to have children, or to do some of these other things. And so what I'm about to say, I'm not going to say because I'm trying to dissuade anyone from getting married or having children, or I'm trying to delegitimize those things or anything like that. I'm just trying to say that when we make those things absolute prerequisites for having a meaningful life, then where does that leave all of the people who either don't have those things, don't want those things, or can't get there yet? And I think that, everybody says, well, you should be okay with being by yourself. That's like a common maxim. You see it everywhere, right? You see it on Twitter, you see it on Instagram, you see it everywhere, that, this sort of like, you shouldn't need anybody and we should be okay being ourselves, etc., etc. But have you ever noticed that it's always said in the most unconvincing ways? Some kind of like inspirational image with someone like on the mountaintop, alone, like boldly looking out at their life of loneliness ahead. It's like not convincing. Or even the kind of like phrasing that we use